Must be something worth talking about to get me revved up and rolling at 10 a.m. here at the Voice of College Football, 10 o'clock Eastern Time, here at the fine studios of the Voice of College Football. We appreciate everybody being here. And again, we scheduled this late last night to talk conference realignment and expansion. Is there a lot to talk about, or is there a lot of talk to talk about? We will try to uncover what we know, what you know, because definitely consider this. We live in the day and age in which all of you, to a certain extent, can go out and get information that other people can as well. There is no longer the knowledge base, the small select elite with all the knowledge, all the information, and then everybody else has to wait for them to talk or wait for them to decide. There are leaks of information. There are threads of information. There are indicators, of course, and we will follow all of those. But many of you have information, have threads of evidence, or at least talk. You have reported conversations that have been made out there that you can share as well. So we will take your calls in just a minute here at the Voice of College Football. I believe I left the link in the live chat. Maybe I didn't, but I need to do that. I will leave the link in the live chat after I remark on the landscape of college football. Of course, invite your friends in here. We'll be here, I would guess, for the next couple hours, for however long it takes to look through the current situation involving, well, when it comes down to it, it involves just about everybody but the SEC. That it could have that type of far-reaching impact. And maybe in the long run, from the ACC to the SEC, it could involve everyone. So we will take your comments and questions, both in the live chat, and then also, of course, you will be able to call in. And I am going to continue what I did late last night, and that's surf online for information. Now, real information is basically impossible to find. Concrete information is basically impossible to find. Consider this. Let's start here. 8 or 9 months ago, USC and UCLA joined the Big Ten. That came 1 year after the announcement that Oklahoma and Texas would join the SEC. Who knew about those moves? It could be argued that those are the two biggest stories in the history of college football, or certainly in the 21st century. Those two schools moving to the SEC, and then those other two schools, we're talking about 3 of the top 10 programs in the country, 4 of the top 20 or 25 programs in the country, and all the moving parts involved. Now, not physical parts at this point, but in regards to contacting, negotiating, and then getting involved. Lawyers, administrators, all of that. Consider the massive amounts of negotiations and information sharing, and then the legal aspect, and all of that, talking about academics, talking about facilities, talking about budgets, talking about travel, talking about all sorts of things that involve conference realignment and expansion. Consider that. And nobody knew, not a soul. When those two stories broke, no insider knew, nobody knew. That's how airtight, ironclad those conversations and negotiations were. Much like, in a very smaller scale, Brian Kelly moving from Notre Dame to LSU and Lincoln Riley from Oklahoma to USC. And then we found out later, wow, in the case of Riley to USC, those talks had been going on for months. Nobody leaked it, not a soul. And there had to be at least a handful of people involved in those conversations. In these conversations, over the course of school after school after school after school that would get involved, and then the conference commissioners, the administrators, the presidents, the chancellors, tons of people, airtight. So nobody knew. So consider that no one knew. So my warning to all of you would be, we have all sorts of people out there running around telling you that they know what's going to happen or they know what has already happened. They don't. What we have, and this was pointed out by our buddy Tony Altamore a few nights ago, he put it in 3 buckets pretty distinctly. The first bucket of people are very select. They're very few. They're college football insiders. I will not name them, but you know who they are. Brett McMurphy would be one. So I guess I will name one. Pete Thamel would be one. And again, I don't follow these guys. Maybe I should. So I'm not really into the insider portion of the college football industry. What we do is things happen and then we respond. We analyze, we discuss it, we debate it. Boom, we're on top of it once it's announced. People have told me in the past, Mark, why don't you break stories? Well, that would be insane and asinine for me to try to compete for breaking stories that once they're broken, everybody knows within 10 minutes. So we discuss, debate, analyze, and of course, engage with all of you. All right. So let's understand that none of those insiders knew about USC, UCLA, or Texas, Oklahoma. They were as blindsided as you were. Maybe they found out 15 minutes before you did. Okay. So let's understand that when we have people running around on the internet telling you that they know, they don't know. Okay. So there's nothing wrong with people getting on the internet and saying, let's speculate. So-and-so said this. So-and-so knows this. We have this little thread of evidence. We have that thread of evidence. We can understand that this is not working out well for this particular conference. We know that these relationships are in play. There's a lot of speculation that can be made. I've made that speculation in the past. Nothing wrong with that. But anybody that tells you they know something is going to happen or they know this and that. So I see that out there and I don't even look for it. Believe me, I'm not into watching other people's information for the most part. Not that I don't come across it and pursue it from time to time if it appears to be quality or entertaining, but nobody knows. Okay, so let's start with that. No one knows. Okay, on to number 2 would be your next category of past the insiders, and that's that select college football sphere of insiders, kind of your Adam Schefter of college football that have some relationships, have those type of insights and connections to be able to give us indicators. Okay. But again, they didn't know. 2 major moves, the 2 biggest moves in the history of college football in recent times, nobody knew. You have folks like myself who will say, I'm going to take all of the factors involved, all the evidence. I will take everything that we know and speculate. I will make some projections and I will make some guesses. I will make some projections. And if you look at the history of my video content over the last 2 years, it's pretty close. So understand that when the Big 12 lost Oklahoma and Texas, I posted a video that said, go get UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, and BYU days later. So the Big 12 went out and did that, not based on my recommendation, but those were the 4 best group of 5 programs to go out and get. So there we go. And then I found it amusing because I see this speculation about Washington and Oregon, also Stanford and Cal to the Big 10. Okay. I could definitely see that happening. Obviously, I could, because a few days after the USC UCLA move to the Big 10, I posted a video that included Washington, Oregon, Stanford, and Cal. This was 7 or 8 months ago to the Big 10. Much of the response that I received for that video predicting, or wouldn't say I predicted it, I would say that I said this is a very real possibility and a most likely move for the Big 10 to continue to go west and to continue to get sister schools along with USC and UCLA, Oregon, Washington, Cal, and Stanford. And this is what they bring to the table. And I outlined from a football standpoint, athletic performance standpoint for the entire department, from a TV market standpoint and viewership standpoint, brand and image, academics, and everything involved. And said, don't be surprised if the Big Ten adds Washington, Oregon, Cal, and Stanford. And probably 3/4 of the people came back at me and said, Stanford sucks at football. Cal sucks at football. The Big Ten's not going to take them on. Okay. All right. So again, TV markets, academics. Stanford was really good in football just 5 years ago. They were great in football for a small period of time about 10 years ago. And Cal can be another Illinois on the field. Okay. And they bring so much more to the table. So now we're seeing that speculation out there about those four. So let's understand that. All right. On the other side of the country, we've got Florida State, and athletic director Mike Alford complained to the Board of Trustees last Friday. And, keep in mind, we've had these conversations. So we had an outstanding show 4 or 5 days ago with Tony Altimore and Tide Guy. Check out that live stream. It's right here on the main channel. Again, Tony Altimore, Tide Guy, jumped on and provided a tremendous 2 or 2.5 hours on what is possible, probable, in the works, dead. It's all out there. Is it all correct? No, it's not all going to be correct. So even the insiders understand sometimes the insiders leak information or report something that they're allowed to based on their trusted sources. But sometimes those negotiations, those situations, those relationships break down and things change. So they're wrong much of the time, not because they're incompetent and not doing their job. It's just because what they are reporting changed. So understand that in negotiations at this level, things change. And then, of course, there's such a domino effect here that it's ridiculous. This is a enormous domino effect. And one of the big reasons why Oklahoma, Texas, USC, UCLA are the biggest moves, I believe, in the history of college football, modern college football, is not just because of the moves of 3 of the top 10 programs in the nation, but because of the ramifications, everything those moves have caused that we are seeing now. Would the Pac-12 have an issue getting a TV rights deal if they had USC and UCLA? No, they would not have an issue. But they now have a major, major issue on their hands trying to get a legitimate media rights deal because they don't have the Los Angeles market. They don't have their best football product. They don't have their 4th or 5th best football product. It's gone. And Southern California is gone. And is San Diego State going to bring Southern California back? No. For the most part, no. So this is the ramification of USC and UCLA. And of course, the Big 12. Ironically, the Big 12 has become the safest haven for college football. Consider this. The Big 12 is the most stable outside of the Big 2. I saw somebody build a map at one point and posted online where they basically just divided in a diagonal fashion the country with the SEC at the bottom and the Big 10 from Los Angeles to Boston. And who knows, we may land there. It might be the AFC and the NFC someday. But as we stand right now, for the foreseeable future, the Big 12 has safeguarded itself kind of in a strange way because they fortified themselves by grabbing the 4 to get back to 12. And they went into some markets that were pretty important, talking about Houston and Orlando, and to a lesser degree, Cincinnati. And BYU is kind of a strange commodity, but they certainly are valuable. Well, on top of that, look at the Big 12. Does anyone want any Big 12 schools? Like, is the Big 10 going to come in and grab any Big 12 schools? Likely not. Is the SEC going to want any of those schools? Likely not. So the Big 12 is safeguarded by its mediocrity. So it's good enough to keep a Power 5 status and have a really good league, really parity-driven league, a very balanced league that's going to be extremely competitive, I expect, in the future. They have no elite teams, no elite programs, but it's strong from top to bottom. And so it's going to be fun to watch as a football fan. If you enjoy football, if you just enjoy watching football and competitive football, you will enjoy the Big 12 going forward. You will not enjoy it if you're locked in on the playoff and who's going to win the national championship, because I cannot foresee the Big 12 winning a national championship in forever. Who's going to win a national championship? And if you bring up TCU, understand, after 2024 and beyond, TCU will have to go through 3 or 4 teams to win a national championship. So their window, and TCU could become, in the Dallas market, with that as a resource and everything that we understand about TCU and expansion within their own university, all the things that this title game appearance has brought them in terms of increased enrollment, that could turn into a different program. But right now it's a top 15 to 25 program, but that is not good enough to win a national championship. All right. Back to Florida State. Of course, Mike Alford complains to the trustees and basically lays out something that they should have all known before he complained about it. And that's, we can't compete. We don't make enough money. So we don't make enough money today. And starting in 2024, we will make even less money compared to the Big Ten and the SEC after they've signed these ridiculous deals. The Big Ten, I believe, stands at $1.1 billion and the SEC at $800+ million. And over the course of the ACC contract, well, the Big 12, I believe, stands at $240 million. And I don't remember the years that are connected, which is obviously key to the math, but they're comparable lengths of contracts. And of course, the ACC tied up until 2036. So the ACC, in forging that contract with ESPN, bought itself a level of security. And even now, if the grant of rights is what I believe the grant of rights to be, based on people that I trust, people that know more than me, people with legal backgrounds, the grant of rights is going to be extremely difficult to break, if not impossible. I don't believe in the word impossible, but 99% ironclad. Again, that's not me making that evaluation. That is me reporting and talking to other people who make that evaluation about the grant of rights in the ACC. So the ACC has secured its place, if that is the case, has secured its place in major college football for the next 13 years to 2036. Because not so much is it too expensive for schools to leave. They can take care of the bill. It's not necessarily, even if it's an exorbitant amount of money. And we saw with Florida State, roughly $120 million to get out of the grant of rights right now. It cost Maryland $31 million 10 years ago to leave the ACC and go to the Big Ten. So for Florida State, the estimation was $120 million. It was simple math. It was easy to see based on the amount of money that they had to pay out for the grant of rights. But then that could be completely offset by the increase in revenue from the Big Ten distribution in the next 3 to 4 years. So in 3 to 4 years, Florida State makes up its money. If that's all we're looking at, and that's the simple math, it's a little bit more involved than that, of course. But it's about the legality and getting sued, lawsuits, and all of that. That is what comes into play here, if that grant of rights is as binding as we believe it to be. If it's not, then shoot. The SEC and the Big Ten can have it, the ACC. They can go to it because they can easily sell themselves to say, do we really need to extend an invitation? Do we really need to explain anything? It's pretty much just sign on the dotted line, take your $80 million per year instead of your 37 or 38. Bam, you're happy. There would be a fight between the SEC and the Big Ten as to which conference would gain the upper hand. Of course, geographically, the SEC makes much more sense to those schools down in the Carolinas and in Florida, of course. But we have seen in recent years that geography has mattered little. So the Big Ten would have an academic advantage on the SEC and a dollar value that's not significant. So I don't think that that would be a huge factor in those schools determining, do we go SEC or do we go Big Ten? Because I believe that even though the Big Ten contract is larger, not by much. Once you distribute it among 16 and now 20 teams through all the course of those years, maybe it would be substantial to those schools. I don't know. I don't think so. I think that there would be more important aspects of it than weighing, okay, 88 million, 91 million per year. Okay, there's more importance here with academics, research, Big Ten, let's go that route, or the SEC in regards to our culture, our environment, our fan bases, our fan base being engaged in the product and continuing to want to go to games and face what could be easily viewed as rivals rather than Georgia Tech traveling to Wisconsin and Minnesota to play football games. All right. I will mention a few reports that I found. We will loosely term them reports. Somebody wrote on the internet. So if you Google search this, I've been doing this for 2 days. So this report's right about 2 days old, maybe not quite. So this is the first Google search link and article that you find at the top of the page every time. I've done this about 18 times. Top of the page. And this particular site, Fan Nation. So I don't know if you watch or any of their, they post some videos on there, but read their articles on Fan Nation. I do not. I see it listed a lot, and maybe I'll grab something based on just trying to find some information that can be found in 48 different places, but I don't read their material. You know, just understand, I lost a lot of respect for a lot of these sites for a number of reasons. All you have to do is read the shoddy writing. It's horrible. Most of it's horrible. Most of it's horrible. Are there still good writers out there? Absolutely. They're probably on the high end, or they're probably doing their own thing. But most of these sites, most of them, not all of them, there are some extremely clever writers on, let's say, SB Nation. And I haven't read an SB Nation article in 5 years, but I know that there were. I'll jump on there, and there's a lot of crap on there too, and a lot of people that can't write, but there's a lot of people that are extremely creative and funny and witty. And the truly great writers are that, plus they can actually tell you what's going on at the same time and give you a narrative and explain things. So that's a difficult skill, and very, very few have it. So I don't read that stuff because it's awful. Horribly written. People can't write. People can't write. So anyway, I go to this Fan Nation because it pops up every time, and I just put in college football realignment. And so they just basically regurgitate everything that's already happened, and then they tell you what could happen, and there's really nothing tangible there except, and this is not a huge exception because it's actually not concrete in any way, shape, or form. They are building their entire narrative, the entire article, and the title based on a report from Action Network. I had to look them up. Who's Action Network? Well, they're a gambling site. I don't know how much reporting they do, how much journalism and investigation they do. Maybe they do. I don't know anything about them. I had no idea they existed until this. But based on everything I could find, it's a gambling site. Maybe they've become journalistic elites. I don't know. But Action Network reports that there have been meetings between the Big Ten and the 4 schools that we talked about in the Pac-12. And that's the only line in the article that has any, if it's true, has any relevance whatsoever. So Action Network reporting that there have been talks between Cal, Stanford, Washington, Oregon, and the Big Ten. So, and again, 7 months ago, my video, Washington, Oregon, Stanford, Cal, Big Ten. Check it out. There was something else here I found. Bleacher Report. My goodness, Bleacher Report. Yeah, I found a few things there. Really, it just turned out to be a bunch of speculation, even though the titles of the articles would lead you to believe that they have some type of inside information. And maybe they do somewhere in those articles. I could not find it. All right. I keep getting away from Florida State, but just to wrap up that situation, Mike Alford, Florida State Athletic Director, to the Board of Trustees. You all know it by now. We don't make enough money. We need to make more money. This is a championship caliber school in athletics, and we need the resources. So his outline proposal had to do with revenue distribution within the ACC. So that's where he took it in regards to details. Is a proposal to say, and follow me here on the math, 14 teams in the ACC times 7%, that's 98%. So everyone gets slightly more than 7% of the TV revenue. It's an equal distribution. Florida State, based on what he quoted, and I'm going to take his word for it because it's pretty obvious to see if you look at the TV ratings, that Florida State delivers more than 15% of the TV ratings. So they should, if you believe in unequal distribution based on merit, then Florida State should make more than twice the amount of money than they do right now in TV rights. Now, if that happened, if the ACC, and it's not going to pass, but if the ACC laid down some kind of mandate, and of course they need, the way any of these conferences are structured is they need the vote from the school presidents, chancellors, however it's organized, but from the schools themselves. So it's not going to pass because then Syracuse, Duke, Georgia Tech are going to say, hell no, we're not paying 3% or not going to drop our revenue from 7% to 3%. So Florida State would go from 38 million to 76 million. So they might be like, okay, we're good to stay in the ACC. Thanks. But that is unlikely to happen. Now, could the ACC do something going forward? We've got an expanded playoff starting in 2024, and the playoff money is going to be maybe much like the basketball situation. And I am not a basketball guy. I've not covered college basketball not covered it, since the year 2000. But I did cover it extensively every day for 7 years at the highest level in regards to the tournaments and teams and Final Fours and all that. But I've not watched college basketball and kept up with it for 10 years. But from what I remember, the tournament is it is a unique commodity to major sports, where the regular season means this and the tournament means that. And so despite all those regular season games, and at one point ESPN and all its platforms were broadcasting something like over 400 college basketball games during the year, the NCAA tournament during that 3-week time frame pulls in the most money. So it's a very lopsided revenue equation for basketball. For football, it's not, because the bowl games get roughly the same ratings as the top regular season games. And then, of course, the playoff has been a nice bounce to the revenue for college football. However, it's only 3 games, but you expand it to 12 teams and we go to 13 games. I don't know how that math works, something like that. It's roughly the same amount of games as teams, although there are buys in the first round. Maybe it's like 9 games. So you get a larger slice of the pie because those games are going to get outstanding ratings, of course. And so maybe Florida State and others are able to negotiate a playoff share that is, okay, we keep 75%, you get 25% if we make the playoffs. And then Florida State's going to be gambling on its future success in football. So that's just something to consider in regards to Florida State's complaint about its revenue share in the ACC. That I can't imagine that. I know that they're steeped in academics, and their life is university life and academics and all the things that are involved there. But I cannot believe that the Board of Trustees were not aware of the money distribution in college football. Appreciate everybody being here with the Voice of College Football. We will take your calls. Want to remind everyone, when you shop Amazon, we could talk Amazon media rights. Yes, when you shop Amazon, please use the link in the description section of all the videos. In caps, Amazon, link is right next to it. Grab that link, please, and do your Amazon shopping. It's the same shopping experience. So especially if you find out that, let's say, Amazon has signed a contract with the Pac-12, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Amazon has signed a contract with the Pac-12, and you're against the Pac-12. You're a non-Pac-12 fan. Well, you would want to use your Amazon link because I'll get like 3% of that purchase, and you're taking that money away from Amazon in the Pac-12. How about that? But if you love the Pac-12, you would still want to use my link because it's supporting Amazon in the Pac-12. Got you covered both ways. Use the Amazon link in the description sections. Got a show with Steve Deace that we deliver every Thursday. We'll be here live at 4:30 Eastern time. Please join us. We're still deciding on what that one topic is going to be this week. Wonder if we've got one. One big topic with Steve Deace every Thursday at 4:30 Eastern. So please join us here. We are launching SEC and Big Ten shows Monday and Tuesday. Big Ten going 2+ hours starting at 6 Eastern. The Big Ten live show, Monday at 6. The SEC, we will be here at noon on Tuesday. We will have all sorts of guests pop in and take your calls as well. Big Ten only on Monday, SEC only on Tuesday for those 2 hours of talk with you. Patreon, Discord. Join the knuckleheads on Discord. It's a fun time. Go to patreon.com, search MarkRogersTV. All right. I got a lot more to say, but let's take a call. And I will drop the link in the chat again. And we will take it from there. We got Will on the line. Will, what's going on?
Morning, Mark.
How are you?
Dang, Mark, I guess I could work for the SB Nation with all that bad journalism they do over there. But
whoa. Before the people at SB Nation get after me, I did say a lot of great creative writers over there, but I also said a lot of garbage. It's a smattering of, they're just looking for warm bodies over there, depending on the site. So it's a little bit of both.
Mark, I mean, this is fun and all, but I just kind of just wish it was back to what it was with West Virginia, Pitt in the Big East, Maryland back in the ACC, A&M and Texas back in the Big 12. But this is just the world we're living now in college football.
You're right. So if you could have your perfect situation, you just outlined some of it, but you would have a Pac-12. Would you go way back? Are you taking Colorado and Utah and knocking them out of the Pac-12?
No, I would keep them in, but
okay.
Yeah, like I like the ACC, what it used to be, the Big East, what it used to be, Big 12, what it used to be, Big 10 when it was just 11 teams, with Penn State added. That'd be about
no Nebraska in the Big 10.
Well, Nebraska, keep them in the Big 12. I don't know.
Yeah.
But Mark, I don't know, like, do you think they're just bluffing for the money, Florida State and Clemson? Like, because it's going to be really hard to get out of the ACC, and I think they're just trying to get more money out of it. I don't think there's any chance they can actually leave. That would be just crazy with the ACC granting rights and everything. It'd just be hard to
agree with you, but not quite to the full extent. My guess is that they're basically bluffing and they would want to be able to push buttons and make it happen. And they really, really just want to stay there, make more money, be fine. But if they get pushed into a corner, and let's say we're 2 years more down the line, we've started this 12-team playoff, and they're continuing to make the amount of money they are, and everybody else is making what.
Yeah. I wonder, yeah, and on the other side, I wonder if Washington, Oregon, Stanford, Cal all went to the Big Ten, would they take the less money like Rutgers did? Would they have to not take as much money?
That is a great question, because they're in a bad spot. So if they see their conference crumbling, either the conference completely dissolves and crumbles athletically, or football, there could be a Big East type Pac-12 or Pac whatever 8. We could see that in the future of some sorts. There are football programs that play in different conferences than their athletic programs. It's rare, but it's happened throughout history, and play at different levels. And not many people look at a lot of the other non-revenue sports, like Notre Dame plays hockey in the Big Ten, right? Yeah. So there are some things out there like that. And again, the Big East crumbled in football and maintained a basketball conference, and I assume other sports at that point. So you raise a great question, because on one hand, I cannot imagine a place like Stanford, with everything that they would be arguing, have as a argument point that they bring to the Big Ten, not from a football standpoint, from an everything else, academic standpoint, the San Francisco market, all of that they would say, why would we? USC is getting a full cut from and I don't know about UCLA. I would assume that they are as well. Maryland, it's amazing. Maryland and Rutgers, we are pushing 10 years later, and they're still not getting a full cut from the Big Ten. They were that willing to jump from the ACC. Wow. I don't know when
I guess it's just they really wanted that academic boost. I mean, their sports have taken a hit, I believe. Although they haven't, when they had Ralph Reach and Gary Williams, that was a lot better than what they had with Randy Edsel, DJ Durkin, and Mark Sturgeon.
And I don't know, they might be at a point that they make up the money. And I don't know what their revenue split is. I would have to look that up. I can't think that they're taking that much less. Maybe it's 75%. I don't know. So, man, you bring up a great point, and it's not that I haven't thought about it before. It would be really strange if each school negotiated its own revenue share, but it's happened with these other schools. So maybe, and I would think in that case, Stanford's in the best position, Washington's next, and whether you believe in academics or athletics, depending, it would either be Cal, Oregon, or it'd be Oregon, Cal.
Yeah. I mean, it would be interesting to see if the schools could get, like, Cal was good back in the day in like the late 2000s, and then Stanford was good too. So it would be wondering if if they did join the Big Ten, if they would put more into athletics, or they would just be happy being at Illinois or Northwestern.
Well, like you say,
hopefully they would try.
Stanford was a good football program just 5 years ago. They were a legit top 25 program, and 5 years before that, they were a top 10 team. Not just one, like they popped up one time, like they're Houston or Boise State or somebody, but for a considerable amount of time, and throughout their history, going back to 1970 and winning a Heisman Trophy and winning a Rose Bowl, they have had their spurts of near greatness, I'll call it.
Yeah. That 2015 game still stings.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But yeah.
Okay, well,
Mark,
anything else?
That's about it. It'll be interesting to see if anything actually happens with all this. If I had to put money on it, no. But no one also thought that Texas and Oklahoma and UCLA will jump. So we'll see what happens in college football. Always there's no off season with Mark Rogers. Keep it locked here. Use that Amazon link, join the Patreon, and have yourselves a wonderful day, ladies and gentlemen.
Will, thank you so much for the promo. Appreciate that. You have yourself a great day.
See you later.
Folks, if you're just joining us, of course, you would like to know what we're here talking about. Well, of course, it's college football expansion and realignment, but specifically what I had to bring to the table. I went on a rant for about 35 minutes and didn't shut up. So I pretty much covered so not that we won't, because we know people are constantly coming in and coming out, that we will cover what we have discussed, but I would certainly like to take your comments and questions. So I've left the link in the live chat. And as James Scott is reminding everyone, please hit the like button. So what have I not hit? Media rights for the Pac-12. I've yet to hit the media rights for the Pac-12. So I find it intriguing on a number of levels. And if you would like a really good discussion on this, check out our USC Live with Matt Zemek from Trojans Wire from this past Monday. Matt always has great insight and perspective on these type of things. I have a TV background, and it was a great conversation. So here we go. These are some of the things that I can't really regurgitate what Matt had to say, but I remember my responses to what he was outlining to be the key points in all of this. So we've heard Apple, Amazon, Ion. We have heard all sorts of possibilities about partnerships for the Pac-12. We are still, despite the cord cutting and despite what has happened to the cable TV industry in the last 10 years, we are still in a situation that's dominated by cable TV for now, but it's diminishing every year. It's not dropping from 100% to 40%, but it's being significantly chipped away at. Like, I know that at its peak, ESPN had 102 million homes, cable homes, out of a universe of like 113 to 116 in terms of television households in the United States. ESPN had 102 million. I'm understanding that figure's about 80 million right now. So that's a significant drop. We're talking like 25, 28%. And it will continue to drop. Now, there's obviously a floor. There are people, maybe like myself, I'm going to age myself and say, yeah, I still have cable TV. It's just easy. It's just easy than saying I'm going to cut the cord and then I'm just going to have to go out there and find this and find that and find this and find that. But if platforms like the NFL and the Big Ten and maybe now the Pac-12 continue to go out there and get streaming contracts, then that's going to push me more in the direction of, with this cable situation, you know what? I got to see 3 games today that I wanted to see, but I couldn't see games 4 and 5 that I wanted to see today, but because they're somewhere else. I do have Amazon Prime, so I guess that would cover me there. So the Pac-12 obviously made some strategic misplays here. And they were in a bad situation to start because they lost the Los Angeles TV market and their best football brand and one of their top 5 football brands. So they're in a precarious state to begin with in terms of negotiations. George Kliavkoff made the determination. He made the decision. I guess this is how it appears on the surface, at least. Maybe he was in negotiations and talks with all these outlets before this, but it seems as though he's really made the push and they've gotten to serious negotiations after the Big Ten signed its deal, after the SEC signed its deal, and now, of course, the Big 12 in recent weeks has signed a new deal. So all the time slots are taken. So I don't know what that strategy was. I just don't know if he was not if he was not hearing the numbers that he wanted to hear. Therefore, he was saying, we're going to wait, and we're going to wait. And maybe coming recession, potentially numbers for these other conferences won't be what they're asking, what they're pursuing. So the market's going to drop, and I'm going to be able to come in, and they're going to realize that the numbers are that we're providing more value than they first thought. Whatever the strategy is, and you can have a good strategy and it can still backfire. So I am not in any way making an evaluation, a judgment of George Kliavkoff's ability to be a commissioner in a major conference, because he took over the worst conference in the worst situation and took it over from the worst commissioner in Larry Scott. I will make a judgment on Larry Scott because I trust the people that I know, and I trust just my own brain and eyes in evaluating what he did to the Pac-12 on so many fronts. So George Kliavkoff took that over. He's got an entertainment industry background, which I thought was perfect, based on knowing nothing about the man, never hearing his name ever, but seeing that, okay, this is his experience and background, and this is how he's talking about the future of the Pac-12. I thought, he's a forward thinker. He's a visionary. He knows the future. So he knows the future, but again, made a misstep on the surface in waiting. And now, does ESPN or Fox really need any more college football inventory? Well, I'm sure if ESPN can fill a 10 p.m. Eastern time slot with a great Pac-12 game, of course, they're all for it. They want as much college football from the start of the day to the end of the day that makes sense, that is going to be value. So I'm sure ESPN and Fox would still be interested in the Pac-12 to some degree, but probably not willing to pay. Number one, not willing to pay what the Pac-12 wants or believes it is worth, nor are they in a position to give them the time slots. They're all gone. So the Pac-12, if I were the Pac-12, I would do everything I could to get on Fox, ESPN, NBC, shoot, anywhere. ABC obviously connected to ESPN, anywhere on network/cable for at least one game a week. Or maybe, how about two? How about we will give you the 10 p.m. Eastern time game, because nobody else is going to be playing, although we've got, of course, the West Coast covered by the Big Ten now. So that is, but it's only two teams, and they're not going to play at 10 o'clock at night Eastern time, even though that's a primetime game on the West Coast. We phrase things, and everything is still listed in terms of East Coast time for a lot of good reasons. It's tradition, so that's the way it is, as everybody talks East Coast time. Sorry about you folks in the Central Time Zone. I lived there for 6 or 7 years and had to adjust to that, seeing that on the TV screen all the time, and in the Mountain Zone, and you poor folks in the Pacific Time Zone. Not that you don't live in a great place, but in terms of trying to decipher the timing of all this and the timing of shows and games. The Pac-12 is in a tough situation, because we had this conversation with Matt Semick the other night, and I laid it out that I would be looking for cracks, and he made the same statement, be looking for cracks in the TV window to try to fit my inventory. Because if I'm the Pac-12 commissioner, I'm in a tough spot, obviously, but I still want ESPN and Fox, or Fox, to be a partner. And it may be a minimal partner, but we could showcase that game. We could have the ESPN 10 o'clock Eastern time game just about every week, that they're not shoving us aside for USC and UCLA. And that would take a hit to my pride, my ego as the Pac-12 commissioner. But at this point, you know what? If you're going to put USC and UCLA in that time slot 4 times out of the 15-week season, and we get the other 11, so be it. I don't like that they get preference, but they're getting preference with over $1 billion paid. So that's just the way it is. But Thursday and Friday night football Okay, Thursday night's the NFL. They kick off at about 8:20. If I'm the Pac-12, I want a Thursday night football game. I want a Friday night football. I am playing alternate nights. Now, I don't think that maybe you do, maybe you don't. Look at what the MAC did. I don't know if that's really benefited the MAC playing on Tuesday and Wednesday night. I guess it has because they have continued to do it now for at least 10 years at their scale, knowing that they obviously came to a determination in the MAC. And I understand Pac-12 fans, I am lowering you to MAC standards right now, but follow me. The MAC decided years ago, nobody watches our football games other than alumni. And maybe even they don't. Alumnus of Kent State University never watches a Kent State football game. So here I am. There are many like me. Don't watch MAC football on Saturday. But if you're a college football fan that wants to watch college football, it's like watching the Bahamas Bowl because there's no other game. So you're going to watch the Bahamas Bowl. You're going to watch MAC football on Tuesday and Wednesday night. I still don't, to tell you the truth. Not that I don't enjoy watching a MAC game, but I'm too busy here creating content. So I don't even watch on Tuesday and Wednesday night. But your college football junkie does. So suddenly the MAC isn't buried with the 30th best game on a Saturday afternoon. They've got the only game on Tuesday and Wednesday night. I don't know that the Pac-12 should go to that degree. The optics may be a bit extreme. Like, we're kind of clownish. We're now down at the MAC level. We'll play on Tuesday and Wednesday night. Or shoot, if you're going to go with my philosophy and my strategy on Thursday night to counter the NFL, do it on Monday night and play early. So I am not advocating competing directly with the NFL, but put a game on it, 7 o'clock, an hour and a half before the NFL kicks off. Kick off Monday night, Thursday night at 7 o'clock, Pac-12 game. And you at least have viewers for an hour and a half. And then if they're really NFL fans, they're going to catch the kickoff of the Jags and the Texans at 8:20. But if they're just a football fan, if they're the voice of college football, but truth be known, NFL versus college football on a Thursday night, I'm watching the better game. I am watching what I believe is the better matchup, and I'm constantly flipping, and I'm trying to watch both at the same time. So truth be known, I'm putting one on one screen and one on the other. So I'm watching both. But if I could only watch one, I'm watching whatever I perceive to be the better matchup. If it's an NFL game, any NFL game, the two worst teams in the NFL, and it's Navy and Tulsa, I'm watching the NFL game. If it's a cruddy NFL game, but it's like we've seen in the past, UCLA and Stanford, I'm watching UCLA and Stanford if I can only watch one. Again, I'm watching both. But here's the deal. If I'm only watching one, I'm generally watching whatever turns out to be the best game. So my viewing habits throughout a Saturday change based on the competitiveness of the games. So the Pac-12 has an opportunity to kick off at 7 o'clock on a Monday and or Thursday, compete against the NFL, get in an hour and a half early. And then if you're like me, if Stanford and San Diego State are at 41-37 with 6 minutes left in the game, and I can go start watching the kickoff of the NFL, no, I want to watch the end of this game. This is an amazing game. They're going to have some dogs. It's going to be sometimes 38-6 in the fourth quarter, and nobody's watching anyway. So capitalize on having really good football games in which you're going to keep some of that NFL audience just to finish out your game. And who cares if you tune into the NFL game with 3 minutes left in the first quarter and it's 7-3. I used to have that fight at times where I used to work concerning college basketball. we used to do these market protects where, let's say, your early NBA game is Cleveland, Detroit, and your late NBA game is Utah, Phoenix. Okay, they're overlapping. The first game's too long. So we would pull markets out. And if the game was really good, we would pull the Utah, Phoenix markets to the tip of their game. And then the rest of the country would still be watching Cleveland, Detroit. But if the Cleveland, Detroit game was a dog, 25-point game in the fourth quarter, then we would just keep the Cleveland, Detroit audience in those markets with the first game, Cleveland, Detroit, and we would send the rest of the nation to the second game. All right, with college basketball, we would sometimes cut off an amazing game, and the same thing with the NBA, just to get everybody to the tip of the next game. And my argument was, you can't please everyone. So that's the first point. If you're running a network like that and everybody, especially at that time, just watching, boom, that game and that network, and they had no other options to try to find the other game, then most likely, I'm guessing, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, that if you're watching the first game and it's a great game, even if you don't care, even if you're waiting for the second game, which is your game, and you're a big basketball fan, and this game's 78 all with a minute left, that you would want to watch the last minute of that game. If you've invested 2 hours into watching a basketball game and it's 78 all with 1 minute left, that you want to watch the end of that game rather than just get to the tip of your game, that you would rather watch the end of a great game and then join your game at 5-3 in the first half. Anyway, that's where we are. We'll take some more calls here at the Voice of College Football. I appreciate these folks being very patient. We got Tony Altamore on the line. Tony.
Hey, how you doing?
I apologize, Tony, for making you wait here. I saw a couple calls pop up, but I didn't even look to see who it was. How you doing?
Oh, not at all. Good. Hey, I just have one piece of info for you, and I'm sorry, we have really bad reception here. One piece of info for you I wanted to pass on that people brought up to us about Florida State and Clemson in that debate with the grant of rights.
Okay.
That I think is interesting and unique and is different from what we've seen anywhere else. And that is that these are two state government institutions. So these are wings of the state government, and they are in states where politicians don't have necessarily to worry about assuming Miami and Florida State were both in the same boat, which they pretty much are, where they don't have to worry about other schools being screwed over. So, for example, with Oklahoma and Texas, the Big 12 has 3 schools left in Texas. And in Oklahoma, you have Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. So neither of those states were willing to go to war as a state government on behalf of the school to get out of the conference. This was an issue in 1956 with the Pac-12 when the state of California was going to war with the Pacific Coast Conference. And you had, the governor rabble-rousing and Ambassador Pauley and rallying people in Washington. It was a whole big drama. But one of the things, whatever side of the political spectrum you're on, Florida, the state of Florida right now, does not really care about political precedents or about political nice. Decided that it wanted to go to war with the ACC and yank its state institutions out and pass laws to that effect or whatever they wanted to do, it really changes, I'm told anyway, that it could really change the legal aspects of the grant of rights in terms of putting the ACC in a really bad position. Now, you could also probably see the same thing with the state of South Carolina, because, again, they don't have another ACC team. Now, North Carolina and Virginia, you probably would not see that because they have a lot more equities going on in here. So it's just an interesting element that, that even that lawyers are not necessarily good at. You have to talk to attorneys that really understand the whole, federal cases battling against determined state governments. And I'll just tell you, having done plenty of work with governments, I don't put my money on a random association of colleges going full war against a state government. If they chose to do that.
And even if they did, don't we see this process playing out for years? It sounds like it.
It could play out for several years. I mean, and possibly it plays out as they negotiate whatever's next. There's a lot of things. If we want to put our tinfoil hats on, and I'm sure that, people will roast me on Twitter for saying this. If we want to put our tinfoil hats on, you could talk about, okay, what if we, resurrected the 1958 idea of the airplane conference and took the best of the Pac-12 and the best of the ACC and maybe, a couple great teams from the American, whatever, and combine them together. One issue with the Big 12 that we can't articulate enough. The other reason no one is leaving the Big 12 is that to join the Big 12, you have to sign this 99-year blood oath that is separate from your whole grant of rights debate, and that is an exit fee equivalent to 2 years distributions, which is currently, under this new deal, is going to be 30-some in media, plus you can expect 10 to 25 in playoff money, new playoff money that's yet to be negotiated, NCAA money, stuff like that. So you're talking about $100 million exit fee buyout for a team to leave the Big 12. And quite honestly, no team in the Big 12 is valuable enough to make that worth it. So I don't think anybody would leave the Big 12, but you could see something really creative where between the Pac and the ACC, maybe in a 5-year down the road or a 7-year down the road period. Again, tinfoil hats on. But if we take our tinfoil hats off, Mark, I think you hit it brilliantly. The real issue here is that there's a lot of playoff money, and extra 10, extra 15 million a team that's going to be coming in with the new playoff contract and the new renegotiation of the playoff contract. And if they create some form of an eat what you kill based on wins, based on whatever kind of uneven distribution, they can close that gap in the ACC. And the other thing is, everybody looks at Texas A&M like, do you want to be the next Texas A&M as like the doormat, big mega power, all the money in the world, and you're the doormat of the SEC. So I think teams are they would probably rather stay where they are if they can close the revenue gap at all. And it just makes a lot of sense to me anyway.
Yeah, history tells us that no team has left its previous league and gone to a new league, and I don't know how many decades this spans. The number is in the 30 to 40 range of schools that have left and not won a championship. It might be near 50, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, to close, I guess Utah would be the exception. What we did when we did analysis on this, we found that teams that made lateral moves tended not to do well athletically. Teams that made upgrade moves did very well. Going back to Michigan State, whether it's Utah, whether it's Arizona and Arizona State going out of the whack, like everything got better for schools that made upgrades. Yep. But schools like Colorado, Maryland, Nebraska have all had very mixed success. Now, of course, the exception is when you're talking about teams going into Big Ten, Pac-12, ACC, and even SEC. There are huge academic benefits that translate into hundreds of millions of dollars that are huge benefits to those schools. And again, don't let the SEC ever fool people. The SEC's academic standards for admissions are rivaled only by the Big Ten. The SEC, since its founding in 1932, has only 100% only accepted AAU members or state flagship schools.
Yeah, I apologize. I was a bit short-sighted and didn't specify my statement. Yes, in dealing with Power 5 conferences and those
Yeah.
lateral moves that we talked about the other night, TCU would be another example, of course, of a group of 5 that elevated and was able to win a conference on the Power 5 level. Yep.
Yeah, you're right. But you're right. It's the lateral moves that have not gone well for anybody. I mean, look at South Carolina. Look at Tulane. Look at Georgia Tech. I mean, Georgia Tech had the one good year. I mean, and they've had a number of good years, but like just in general, none of them had the success that they had in their original conferences. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with USC and UCLA. But remember that USC and UCLA have done this a couple times before. They're not new to the we're going to pout and go on our own.
Tony, I don't know if you heard what I had to say a few minutes ago about some recommendations that I would have for the Pac-12 in their negotiations for media rights, but they obviously are in a position where they need to get awfully creative.
Well, first of all, there is also a very active, and apparently the Pac-12 is aware of the 2 PR firms that are coordinating this. There's a very active disinformation campaign, very effective on them. So I think we just take with a grain until we get an actual word of what is really coming from them. I mean, I've heard directly from schools where people are like, what these people.
Hey, Tony. Tony, if you can hear me, you may want to click out and come back. We lost Tony, unfortunately. Tony, if you can hear me, come on back. I'm going to click you out, and we're going to move on to our next call. We will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football, and I'm going to just restate what I said off the top because I went on for 35 minutes, but just the one statement to start us out. Keep in mind, Oklahoma and Texas, those 2 mammoth institutions, athletic programs, football programs, USC, UCLA, same deal, moved. They started talks, they negotiated. Talk about the negotiations involving massive facilities, budgets, academics, databases, all the things that go into the move of a institution and its athletic programs from one conference to another. All those negotiations went on, all the legalities, all the lawyers involved. And nobody knew it, not even the best insiders in college football. They blindsided all of us, all 4 of those schools, in making moves over the last 2 summers to the SEC and the Big Ten. So consider that. Anytime you hear somebody who says that they know what's going to happen, they don't. They can make projections. We've made projections. But I have clearly stated every time I've made a projection, I have basically said, this is what I know about the football, which you can take to the bank. This is what I know about the TV market. You can take that to the bank. This is what I'm gathering based on information from guys like Tony Altimore, first and foremost, but also my own research regarding academics, culture, etc., and legalities involved. And then I've made some type of projection / recommendation to conferences, and you can see all the videos. But I've never stated this is going to happen. I know. Next call here at the Voice of College Football. We got Lawrence on the line. Lawrence, how you doing? Lawrence.
Hey, I'm good. I'm good. How are you?
I appreciate you waiting. Thanks so much for calling. What's going on?
No problem. Not too much. Just watching all the action during the offseason with the, rumors and Florida State making their demands. I mean, I really think that Florida State should just go ahead and just litigate it. The grant of rights is in 2036. We're in 2023. So, litigation won't last 13 years. I mean, it may last a few years, but it won't. I don't anticipate it lasting 13. I think since they're talking slick like this, they might as well just go for it. I mean, like the AD said, they're going to fall behind in money. That's just a given over the course of the next 13 years because Big Ten is going to re-up, SEC is going to re-up, even I think the Big 12 is going to re-up before them. So then you get into the same scenario the Pac-12 is going to be in. By the time you get to renegotiating, you don't know what might happen in the landscape. There might not be a lot of seats for you at the table as well. And given the ACC's product to the date, it's an average product. I would say the ACC football, other than Clemson, is on the same level as the Pac-12 has been with USC.
Well, I would agree based on the football performance of the ACC. The last good season they had was in 2016. But since then, it's been awful by all measurements. They're losing 65 to 70% of their games outside the conference against the other Power 4 conferences. So 3 things to take into consideration. I'm not saying that you don't have a great point there, Lawrence, but 3 things to take into consideration. So when it's reported how much money each ACC team makes, that's a bit of disinformation there, because basically it's almost like an NFL or a Major League Baseball player's contract. When we see it's 5 years for $200 million, he's making $40 million a year. Okay, not necessarily. He might be making 28, then 30, then 34, then 40, then 50, and it averages out to 40 million. So based on what I've seen and been explained, is that the ACC contract averages whatever it is, 32 million, something like that per team. But we are past the lower figures. So they have allowed for inflation, and there are increases coming and already taking place. So they're not making quite what that average number is. It's going to increase to the end. So it's not as bad as it looks on the surface, number one. Number two, as you well know, the revenue distribution is 7% per team. Do the math, 14 teams times 7%, is almost 100%.
And
it's 98%.
It's not going to increase as much as the Big Ten SEC.
No.
Over the course of time. I'm not saying you're saying that. I'm just saying that, they got inflation built in, but they're still going to fall behind.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. No, I'm not. I'm just clarifying that when people read 32 million, that's not accurate going forward. It's accurate, but you have to look past it. But no. They're not coming close to. Absolutely. You're completely correct. But the other thing in play, if Florida State's just looking out for itself, it doesn't care about the ACC. They just want to either stay in a stabilized ACC or move on to the Big Ten or the SEC because they think it's going to crumble. Then they're obviously just caring about themselves. So if they can work out a different distribution, which I've got to think is going to be extremely difficult to change what's already in play. The likes of Georgia Tech and Boston College and Duke are not going to vote to give Clemson, Florida State, Miami more money, but they can do something about this playoff pool money that's coming, this expanded playoff, and they can say, hey, we're Florida State. We make more money through TV revenue than anybody else in the conference. Plus, we expect to make the playoffs. And when we do make the playoffs, we're not going to split the money evenly like bowl money split between everybody. So if Wake Forest, and they're a bad example recently, but if they don't go to a bowl game for 10 years, they're still getting the same split as everybody else. But they can do something about that going forward with especially the playoff money. I'm not saying I'm not saying that's going to be enough to keep Florida State. I'm just saying that they can do things within their current structure to help themselves.
I get it. And let's be honest too. The Florida State football product hasn't been overwhelming either. I mean, they had a decent season last year, but they're relying on brand at this point to try and get more money. It's not because of football. It's not because of on the field play, because last time they won the championship was with Jimbo. That was 13, 14. I mean, we're talking about almost a decade ago when Florida State was on top of the football world. So they're making a play based on their brand and their viewership. It's definitely not based on football. So they definitely,
You just hit it, Lawrence, because there's a difference between how good you are in football versus how much money you bring in. Now, they're closely aligned because obviously people want to watch winning football teams. So that's why Ohio State rules the Big Ten and USC rules the Pac-12 and so forth. We all know that winning and money go hand in hand. But for places like Florida State, obviously their brand, their tradition, their winning ways of the past still benefit them because they're still, as we showed a chart the other day when Tony joined us, we showed a chart of TV viewership in the ACC since 2014, and Florida State's still number one, despite having 5 consecutive horrible seasons. Clemson's 2, Miami's 3. It's exactly the way you would anticipate it to be, but they've been able to live off their brand, and people still love Florida State football. Although much of that TV rating has to do with ESPN and ABC placing them in the best time slots as well.
Right. So, I mean, at this point in time, let's say that they wanted to renegotiate the deal with ESPN, and they wanted to make it performance based, like, you know, playoffs and, you know, New Year's Six bowls and all that, if that still even exists after the playoffs. The reality is, I don't anticipate Florida State really being in the mix. So smart people in Florida State, you know, football guys who really know where their team is internally, of course, they're going to try to sell, you know, where we anticipate to be in the playoff, we anticipate to be ACC champs. But if they don't hit these metrics, they're still not going to get the money that they may have negotiated. So at this point in time, if I'm Florida State and I'm being objective as a president or a chancellor there, and my AD saying we're going to fall behind money-wise, I might take my chances to just sue. I mean, that's the smart play to me if you want your money right now, if you want to try to get the money right now versus trying to negotiate how you do on the football field. Because I don't anticipate Florida State being with the Alabamas and Georgias and Ohio States and you know, even some of the Big 12. Like you got TCU this year, you might get Baylor next year or Kansas State, depending upon how that plays out. And then as you get further into the season with the 12 teams, Clemson, I'm going to just go out here on a limb and say Clemson's going to probably still be the top dog. Maybe Wake Forest. I mean, you know, they've been stepping up their game too. So to me, if I'm Florida State, I'm just going to go flat out and sue. I don't even want to negotiate the fact I won't be in the playoff because you're taking a risk either way.
Well, you bring up some good points, Lawrence, and I would say that I could make an argument for Florida State coming back and being what Florida State's used to be, but I can also make the argument that you're making that the 10-3 season that they just posted was a bit of smoke and mirrors. Not that they weren't a good football team. They were a legit top 15 football team in America, but they won their last 6 games against nobody any good. And they won a bowl game against a 6-7 Oklahoma team. So
they beat LSU too, didn't they?
They beat LSU early in the season. Absolutely. Yeah. The first game of the season, they beat them by 1 point. Yep. That was their best win of the season.
For sure. That was neutral site too, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So that
almost a road game. They were in the Superdome. So yeah, that was the next. I don't want to rain on Florida State's parade. Just people are going crazy about Florida State, that they're going to be a top 5 team. And to your point, this particular Florida State team that we're going to see in 2023, we just posted a ton of videos on the Florida State channel analyzing every position. They're bringing almost everything back. Like, this is their year. Now, if they can recruit off of this year and what they've done the last 2 years, then that would be great. But their recruiting is still not Florida State standard, like top 5 in the country. They're still recruiting top 20 in the country, and that's not going to compete in the playoffs.
Right. Well, see, and that's why I think at this stage of the game, while you're kind of hot, you win 10 games, you beat an LSU, I might go forward and try to sue right now to try to get out, because maybe then I can get picked up with the SEC and then, you know, renew that Florida, even though they play every year, but to have it in their conference, I think the SEC would like that. Same thing with if Clemson wanted to try to get out. You bring Clemson to the SEC, you get that Clemson South Carolina game within that conference. It's a monster game down south. So I think these guys have to make moves right now while the money's where it's at. Yeah, it's a little bit down, but who's to know it may or may not come back. So while you got an opportunity to get out or to try to sue to get out, I say you try to get out right now. Don't have your brand tied to your performance on the field if you can help it. Like Wake Forest will probably try to make that bet. Well, you know, we want a performance base, get more money in the ACC if we're making bowls or playoffs right now. But Florida State, if you got that type of brand, or Clemson too, you stake your future on what you do right now. And so for me, if I'm these two schools, I'm suing to get out of there right now. And it may take a couple of years. And then you never know, because 90% of litigation never goes to trial. You might get a good settlement to get out.
Yeah, so you make some great points there. The only thing that I would say is on Florida State, Clemson, and Miami's side is I don't think they should have any fear of not landing somewhere prominent. Like the SEC is going to take them, the Big Ten is going to take them. They've got too much going for them in terms of their brand, their money, their football success, where they're located in terms of recruiting, that they're going to land somewhere. But to your point, do they want to land somewhere where they don't want to be, or do they want to land somewhere where they've got to take a cut in revenue and the Big Ten says, okay, the ACC crumbled, you got to go somewhere, we'll give you half of what everybody else gets because we've got the leverage in negotiations. You need a place to land and you got nowhere to go, so we'll take you. Yeah, we would love to have Florida State, but you're only going to make half of what everybody else makes because you're desperate. All right, so Lawrence, we appreciate that call coming in from him. I believe he's trying to pop back in. Yeah, Lawrence.
Yeah, I was going to just say, you're right. FSU, Miami, Clemson, they can land anywhere that they want at this moment in time. But will the same be able to be said 13 years from now when the grant of rights is over in 2036? Because a lot can happen between now and then.
Sure. I would expect not a lot to happen in regards to their worth and their value, but I don't know if you heard my point when you jumped off there for a second, but I was just making the point. Those three schools are always going, unless there is just some unthinkable thing. Look at what happened to Penn State and they still didn't fall off the map. So right. I can't imagine any scenario in which Florida State, Miami, and Clemson will not be football. Even if they're not playing well on the field, they're still valuable football commodities in 12 years. The issue with them would be if they're in a conference that's crumbling and they're desperate to go somewhere that the Big Ten or the SEC would say, yeah, we're happy to have you, but we're paying you half of your revenue share because you're desperate and we got the leverage and you got to find a place. And so we'll do it, but you're only making 50% of what Auburn and Alabama and everybody else makes.
Right. Well, that 50% could be more than what the ACC gives them. I mean, if you think about it, they're making 70, 80 billion dollars, and then once that SEC contract gets read up, they're going to be probably making 100 billion to school themselves. So if you give them 50 and they're going to make incrementally 35, 36 million dollars at $14 million plus, it might be worth it just to get in there and work your way up to get to that full share when you're taking half the money, and half the money is still better than the ACC.
Man, I appreciate you calling. We're going to take some other calls here, but
all right, sure thing.
Call back anytime, man. All right, we'll keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. Some reminders here. Our Oklahoma show that we typically do on Wednesday is moving to Friday this week, so please join us on the OU channel. We will announce a time soon on that. Also, later today, Michigan Live at 5, Florida State at 6. You may want to join us for that over on the Florida State channel. Florida State, folks. Florida State at 6 Eastern, Miami at 7 Eastern. And, of course, if it involves Florida State, that means it probably leaks over to the Miami show as well at 7 o'clock. We're going to come back late tonight, about 8:30 Eastern, I believe, is what I set the time at, to talk college football realignment. McD showing up for the show. What's going on, McD?
Hey, Mark. How you doing?
Doing well. What's going on?
I'm doing great. I want to talk about I want to get your opinion on something not involving realignment. I don't know.
Sure.
What do you think of the coach that through his first 50 games did better than the current coach at Texas A&M, being on the Maryland coaching staff as the associate head coach / defensive assistant?
All right. So to interpret for everyone, McD is talking about Kevin Sumlin through 50 games having a better record than Jimbo Fisher. Believe it. All right. This is what I think. Jimbo Fisher took over a really good football program. They weren't necessarily winning big on the field, but tons of money, tons of facilities, first rate in every way. They have poured so much money into that football program, even pre-Jimbo Fisher, that it's ready-made to win. And, you're playing in one of the two best states to recruit talent in. So great situation for Jimbo Fisher. They back up the Brinks truck, dump it on Jimbo Fisher to win SEC championships. He is now entering his, if I add him up right, 6th season.
He came in 18, yeah.
So 5 seasons, he's basically been at best an 8-4 coach. That's been his best season outside of the COVID year. When, depending on how you evaluate that, I think a bit of it was smoke and mirrors. They had an easy schedule. They played a pretty light opponent in the Orange Bowl, but facts are facts. 9-1, top 5 finish, won the Orange Bowl. But besides that, very underwhelming. Basically, he's been Kevin Sumlin too. And then this season, of course, he brings in the top-rated recruiting class of all time in 2022. It fractures to a certain extent. I know that narrative, though, McD, has been overplayed. People think that class has crumbled. They've had a few defections. It's not crumbled. So they still have a ton of talent on that team. All right. The only reason, McD, that I believe that Jimbo Fisher has a job right now is because of how much money he makes. If that were any other coach, and let's say he would have gotten a reasonable contract. Okay, 4 years, $7 to $8 million a year, $35 million contract. He would be fired. He would have been fired. They would have bought him out, fired him, and he would be gone. But they would owe him something in the neighborhood of $75 to $85 million if they fired him right now. That's why he's still the head coach.
I know. I'm just laughing. I just find it funny that he's still around and like they bought into him. Meanwhile, Kevin Sumlin, face palm down at Arizona, but he's now a defensive assistant, or excuse me, an offensive assistant. Because I think is he an offensive or defensive guy? Sumlin.
He's an offensive guy.
Offensive.
Although he played defensive back in college, but he became an offensive guy. That's what made him a big deal at Houston and got him the Texas A&M job.
I just find it funny that he's on the Maryland coaching staff now. That was Mike Locksley's big offseason move.
Yeah, I noticed that.
So I did want to acknowledge that. The only other thing I want to bring up to you, Mark, because I don't want to waste, I don't want to take too much of your time, is I think the Pac-12. I've been listening for the past few weeks involving the Pac-12, Florida State with the ACC, which Florida State and Clemson do have a point. I mean, piggybacking to the last caller, what does Wake Forest, what does Syracuse, what does I don't know, whatever school in the ACC, not in the first ones that come up in your mind, what do they bring to value when it comes to football in the ACC?
Well, all you have to do is look at first and foremost the stadium capacity, and then you look at the TV revenue. So even though we don't think much of, Syracuse football, if you go to the TV ratings and you watch a Syracuse game, and there's a great site, I can't tell anyone what it is just because I don't know, but just Google college football TV ratings and you'll find this site and it will show you the TV rating for every college football game for the entire season. And it's been doing this for about 10 years. You'll see that Syracuse, are they drawing crowds like Georgia or Ohio State? Of course not. But, you can put a Syracuse NC State game on TV and draw 4 to 5 million people and make money.
Sure.
And then you can sell 50,000 tickets, even when they're not good. So I don't know. I can't do the math in my head to figure out, what value is that bringing? Does it match their payout? It must. But they also have a basketball program that makes a lot of money and is a traditional power. And then you've got a bunch of non-revenue sports, depending on, there are some outliers. There are some women's basketball teams that make money, and there are some baseball teams that make money. They're very few, but the value must be there. I can't calculate in my head what the value is, but it's there to some degree.
And I'm not attacking Syracuse. I'm just using them as an example.
Sure.
But I think, and I was thinking about it throughout the past few days. I think we're just gonna. I think eventually, we're just gonna head to 3 football conferences, like big, massive football conferences. You have the Big Ten and the SEC, respectfully, and whatever's left over goes to the Big 12, give or take. I think it's where it's heading. Maybe the ACC stays together, but I don't see. I don't see the ACC surviving without Clemson, Florida State, Miami, North Carolina, all in there.
No.
I don't.
If you take those away, they're not
Yeah.
surviving. And there's nowhere else to go for teams, for schools.
Mhm.
But just to extend on my other point, we've got 65 Power Fives. I think with the 4 additions, we've got 69 now. I think we've got 68 plus Notre Dame. Well, if the ACC didn't have Georgia Tech, Syracuse, fill in the blank, Boston College, whoever you consider to be at the low end of football status, well, then you don't have a conference. And who else would they add? Old Dominion, Liberty. So they have the best of the options that are available. You can't have a 4-team football conference and just say the only football teams that we have in football programs that are worth a damn are Miami, Clemson, and Florida State. So we're going to have a 3-team league.
Yeah, and I mean, there's other teams I mean, I know Georgia Tech has had some success in football. Virginia Tech, obviously, Pitt, but I just don't see. I mean, that's I'm kind of to my next point. I think the Pac-12 is dead. I just think it's dead. I don't care if they get the TV deal done or not, because the only saving grace for the Pac-12 right now, in my opinion, is that Kevin Warren went and he took the Bears president job. That's the only saving grace for the Pac-12 right now, because Oregon and Washington would absolutely be going to the Big Ten, in my opinion, if Kevin Warren was still the commissioner.
If the Big Ten wants them. They want to be in the Big Ten. We don't know if the Big Ten wants them, because the Big Ten could have added them 8 or 9 months ago. But based on all, I think, fact-checked reports, we know that Oregon and Washington applied to the Big Ten, and the Big Ten did not accept them. They basically gave them a wait and see. So they obviously, while Notre Dame could call the Big Ten today and they would have a contract in place within an hour, and I'm kidding, but a framework of it, because the Big Ten is so anxious to grab and bring in Notre Dame. If they felt the same about and analyzed and evaluated Washington and Oregon to be such great commodities, why would they tell them, wait, we'll figure it out. You're going to have to wait. So yes, Oregon and Washington want to be in the Big Ten.
And that's why I don't understand. If I would be like, yeah, bring them in, because
why?
Because you basically have the West Coast locked up at that point.
Does the Big Ten need to have the West Coast locked up? So the point I'm making, I get your point. Washington's a great football brand. So is Oregon. They're 2 of the top 15 to 20 brands in the country, but there's more to it than that. And again, getting back to the almighty dollar, the Big Ten, first and foremost, there are a ton of other factors, but first and foremost is going to look at their TV contract, and they'll probably go to their TV partners, which used to be ESPN, is now Fox, CBS, and NBC, and say, okay, you're giving us this much money. This is what you're paying us for the next 10 years. And if we add Oregon and Washington, what are you going to pay us? Because no other school in the Big Ten wants that TV deal to stay stagnant at the same dollar amount, but add 2 other schools. And now it's got to be distributed 2 more times. And so everybody else in the conference loses money.
And that is a good point. And to piggyback to your question, do they need Oregon and Washington to lock up, and why they need the West Coast? I will argue that yes, because I think the South and Texas, football talent wise, is superior to the Big Ten's landscape in the Midwest and the West Belt area.
Absolutely, it is. It's not even close.
And yes, Oregon and Washington those states might not have the biggest football pools.
Exactly.
But
you're not adding anything there.
I do think that you could get I do think Coast kids will be willing to go to those schools.
Yeah, you may have something there. I don't know. That's a pretty. It's an assumption to make, but I think it's a logical one to make. That yeah, if you're a really good football player um, in the state of California, but for some reason USC is not going to sign you in UCLA, that you would be more apt to play ultimately in the Big Ten by going to Washington and Oregon than otherwise playing for another Big Ten school. Yeah, that's an individual decision that depends on the person. But yeah, there's got to be a collection of. We know obviously most college football players, even though this is becoming a national sport and it's a small world now with technology and with the airplane, and a lot of student athletes do choose to go to a school across the country, that there's still a tie to geographically because of family, because of familiarity, and what lifestyle they want to lead, that they stay close to home generally.
That's basically you couldn't put it any better. Um, but as I said, I think the Pac-12 is dead. I mean, I was thinking, I actually don't think Amazon's a bad idea, only because you could sit there, you could put their game of the week on Friday with Amazon. They already have Thursday night football. For Amazon's selling point, and I know I'm getting a little bit off topic of college football, but they're allowing Thursday night football to be flexed. So let's say it's a bad game in week 12 of the NFL. They could flip that game over for a better game starting this upcoming season for the NFL, which helps Amazon because you get a better game for them on Thursday night football. I don't think that's a bad I don't think that's a bad marking point if the Pac-12 wants to join Amazon, because you gotta think without USC and UCLA, you're still gonna probably have, I would say, out of the college football season, I'm gonna be generous and say 5, but probably really 4 games that you want to watch that are probably top 25 matchups or like just rivalry games. Um, let's say they have Washington and Oregon. Oregon's ranked number 8 in the country, but Washington might be struggling a little bit. I still want to watch that game if that's like the only game on, because it's a rivalry game. I think it means something. But
Well, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, this would be my strategy basically if I'm the Pac 12. They have been locked out of Saturday football to a certain extent. I would still go to Fox and ESPN and say, we want to play at 10 o'clock Eastern. And we understand that you've got USC and UCLA. However, they are only going to play so many games at 10 p.m. Eastern time. So if we can play 12 of the 15 weeks, I would still want a network time slot somewhere. I wouldn't want to go exclusively to Amazon or Apple or a streaming device or an alternate channel Ion or some crazy place where nobody can find you. I would want to have a staple somewhere on the network calendar. And I basically now you can watch the Pac-12 at 3:30 in the afternoon on ESPN, ABC, or Fox, and you can at prime time, but you won't be able to do that going forward because they've been locked out of those time slots. That's why I would push still for a 10 p.m. time slot on Saturday with one of those two networks, and I would want to do the same on Thursday and or Friday night. I think there's an opportunity, even though the NFL is playing on Thursday, kick off a game at 7 o'clock Eastern. You play half the game before the kickoff of the NFL game. And if you've got a really good game going and fringe NFL fans are going to stay with a college game that's 35-30 in the fourth quarter and join the NFL game late first quarter, do the same thing on Friday where there's no competition from a football standpoint. I would be playing on Thursday and Friday night if I was the Pac-12, and I would want to pinpoint a late game on Saturday on a major network.
and I think that's a great idea. I know they're still in talks with ESPN for having, I think, some type of time slot there late, from where I read and everything I heard. But the only disagreement I would have is I don't think they can compete with the NFL. I just don't. I think
Hang on. I'm not talking about competing with the NFL. I'm talking about kicking off a game at 7 Eastern, and the NFL kicks off at 8:20.
I get yes. I think a lot of people will leave from the NFL, even if it is a good game.
That's fine.
So you're
Yeah, they will leave for the NFL. But how many people, I don't know what these numbers are. I'm just conjecturing. I would like to know what type of hit the NFL took in terms of viewership, not in terms of money. They obviously made a money move, and they also made a move for the future going to Thursday night on Amazon. You know, let's all recognize that they didn't like pick up everything and go to Amazon. They scheduled one game, and it's a bit of an experiment, and I'm sure it's successful, and that's what the future is. But not everybody. I know for me personally, I have Amazon Prime. I don't even know if I can get the NFL on Thursday night, and I watched every NFL game on Thursday night before they went to Amazon. And this past season, I didn't watch one. I even forgot that they were even playing. And I'm sure there are a lot of people like me. So you could capture an audience, first of all, 7 o'clock Eastern. You start playing football at 7 o'clock Eastern, and you're in the third quarter at 8:20. And yeah, there are going to be a lot of people that just want to watch football. They'll watch it at any time, but they want to watch the NFL first and foremost. So they leave the game. But there are going to be a lot of people like me that are going to say, this game's 38-34 in the fourth quarter. I want to watch the end of this game, even though I could care less about Utah and Washington State, but it's a good game versus I can miss the first quarter of the Jags-Texans game.
I thought you were about to say another team besides the Texans, but
I'm big on throwing the Texans on Thursday night, I guess.
Nah, my team's the Titans. When you said Jags, I was like, God, I hope you didn't. I hope you didn't say Jags Titans, because I'll be like, I think I'm gonna have to leave for that, even if it's a good game. But no, I mean, I still think. I mean, you make a great point. I can't dispute it or anything, but
I might think about playing Monday night, doing the same exact thing.
now that will be interesting. If you do it Friday and Monday, that would be interesting, because then I think you can compete with the NFL, because you gotta do like all these things, like get out of Amazon, hit ESPN or ABC, wherever the Monday Night Football game's on.
And if you take it to that degree, I guess you might as well play on Tuesday and Wednesday, and you've got no competition. You've got the MAC. And if you're the Pac-12, you should be able to gain viewers over the MAC. So suddenly people that are watching MAC football who could care less about the MAC, they just want to watch football, are going to watch the Pac-12 game.
The only argument I have against that, and this is probably a dumb argument, is I'd rather see the snow game, like the one MAC game that was a blizzard. If I think it was Central Michigan and somebody.
Yeah.
But that will be my only argument. But
what's that have to do? Wait a minute. You lost me. There was a blizzard on a Tuesday night in the MAC.
People like snow games.
Oh, whoa. Okay. You're pulling a needle out of a haystack.
Yeah,
That there was
I know,
a snowstorm one time during a MAC game, so
I
they
know,
might
I
have
am.
watched that game over
I
a
know, I
Pac-12
am.
game. Okay.
That's the only time I think
once
I
every
would have
20
probably
years.
not changed the channel over the
Okay.
Pac. But
All right.
I mean, you're not wrong. But I still think the Pac-12, Pac-10, they're dead.
All right, McD. Appreciate you being here.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for the call. All right. We appreciate the super chat contribution, and this is a great point. So I went down another path with the conversation with the previous caller in regards to why it would be difficult for Florida State and Clemson to litigate and what other conditions could be met to appease them. But this is a great point by Packer 910. Thank you much. Thank you for the contribution. How much would it cost Florida State or Clemson to litigate a cast iron contract for 6 years? Yes. It's a phenomenal point. It's a great point. All right. Back to the phone lines. We got Chris on the line. Chris, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
What's up? I'm doing well.
Thanks, Mark. I don't want to waste too much of your time because sometimes I repeat myself a lot, and so if I get off track, just cut me off. It's like I won't be upset, but
Amazing how many people call me and the first thing out of their mouth is that they don't want to waste my time.
I don't.
Well, I appreciate that, but my response would be, well, if you don't feel like what you have to say is valuable, then you shouldn't waste my time at all and not call.
Well, I agree with that. That's kind of my point. But anyway, I did what I think I already I sent you an email. I don't know if you saw it or not. It was kind of a summary, I guess, of historical where the conferences kind of fare. Did you get a chance to see that or no?
I have it. I have not looked at it.
Oh, that's okay. It's fine. Basically, all it did was it just kind of gave a, on a scale that I use, which kind of it gives a pretty good idea, I guess, of how the conferences stack up against each other. And I went off of the kind of the old way where we had 10 teams in the Big Ten, and I included the Southwest Conference, and which had 9, I think. And then, but kind of what I was interested in was kind of where it showed kind of where they divided themselves, because you talked about I guess there's going to be 3 or 4 additional Power 5 teams now. Cincinnati, I think, Houston, Central Florida, and Brigham Young, I think.
Yes.
So, and they're going to be in the Big 12, I guess. But the question, I guess, I have, Mark, I hate to keep bringing it up because it's kind of an old topic, but the Southeast Conference, obviously, it's a better conference. I mean, that's kind of what I was leading into, is like the data that I showed you shows that it's probably the best conference, but of course people probably already know that, but
yep.
Big Ten would be the second best. So it makes sense why teams would probably want to move to those. I don't know why they necessarily would want to move to the Big 12, except that, I guess to keep them where they're at, front and center, I guess. But at some point, I think you would think, I don't know, isn't there a diminished return at some point? I know in UCLA, USC, going to move to the Big Ten. I understand what that might do for them. It's a better move. I understand that, but where does, at what point does it become maybe kind of a lateral move? Maybe you've already talked about that. I kind of think you led into that a little bit. I know Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC. I know that's a move up, no doubt, but that's only because the Big 12 has lost a little bit of its, at what point does it necessarily become an advantage? If that's what we're moving to, so where do we draw the line? Is it going to be 24 teams per conference now, or do you have any insight on that?
Well, I would say it this way. Let's make it very simple, that for a particular school, there are only, we can talk money, academics, football brand. We can talk all sorts of TV ratings. We can talk all of that. But when it comes down to it, a school is going to leave its conference for only one of 2 reasons. Either they get a better deal from another conference, or they believe that the conference that they're in is going to fall apart. For the conference and their perspective, they only take on an additional school if it brings value to them.
Sure.
And values calculated first and foremost by money. Now, that's not the only consideration, but it starts there.
I understand.
So that's pretty much the determination that, let's say, we'll take the Big Ten, for example. That is going to be their complete driving force, is going to be money and academic standing. So okay. The money is usually tied to how good the football program is, and the athletic program to a lesser extent. Usually goes hand in hand. The most successful football teams bring in the most money. And then there's also an academic component that's important to all these conferences, and especially the Big Ten and the ACC, I would say, and the Pac-12. But I guess that the only other thing that could push maybe the Big Ten or the SEC to expand is that they're playing this chessboard, and if the other one gets too powerful, that they may be willing to take a per team hit financially to gain more value and more teams and more leverage by taking on more.
Well, I guess I didn't.
It's an arms race.
Well, sure. And I understand, like I said, the data that I sent you, again, I guess I got a chance to look at it, but historically, the best 2 conferences, like I said, were the SEC, Big Ten. Probably not going to surprise too many people unless they expected somebody else up there. But So, but really, all that really does, though, is that, I know it strengthens those two conferences, no doubt. I mean, I can understand that. I mean, you're bringing in, UCLA, even, and it's not limited, I guess, to, that's a good basketball. Obviously, I mean, they're good in every probably aspect that you can imagine, I would think. Maybe even academically. I don't know much about the academics, but so I can understand all that. Maybe even the, the market share and all that, media rights and all that. But I guess my question again was, so is it going to stop at 16 then, or is that where they limited, or is it? Because I mean, there was talk of like these conferences including as many as 24. Do you know? Is that something that they might do? Do you know? Expand to 24?
Oh, sure, they could.
Well, at that point, I kind of think if they do that, that's kind of the question I have, because, in a 12 games regular season, Mark, and I've researched this a little bit, and I think I kind of know what I'm talking about. There isn't much gain to have beyond. I mean, so what that would actually do if they include as many as 24. That's going to make it probably to where you're going to split it. And so why not? I guess kind of what I'm thinking, and, I don't know if you agree with this or not, you have these 12-team conferences. They seem to do pretty well. I mean, they're stable. I mean, I don't mind if what this restructuring does is give a better media rights, I guess that I can understand maybe even why they're going about it. But so let them expand to 24, then they can split into two conferences, I guess. And then, so what's the benefit beyond 12-team conferences is kind of my question. I don't quite understand what's to be gained beyond 12. I really don't.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but everything that you just said makes total sense, except for we have to understand there's no one governing all of this. All of this would be completely different if there was a commissioner and a governing body that was looking out for the entire sport.
Right.
But we don't have that. Therefore, each sport, each conference is working on its own behalf and doing what's best for them. They don't care about the rest of the conferences. So therefore, we could have some uneven structure when it all settles.
Well, do you remember, this kind of going back in time, I guess, do you remember when the WAC, I mean, I don't know exactly why they were doing it, but they had 16 teams for about 2 or 3 years there, where they included more teams for some reason. And what it created, I think, was a division, because they experimented with these quadrant things. I think, I'm not exactly sure how they worked, but I think to advance, you had to like win your quadrant or something. And then I don't know how they had a championship game, but I don't know exactly how they picked the teams that played in it. But I think that, but it created some problems, because I think there were some traditional rivalries that only played each other maybe every other year, so what they ended up doing to solve that problem was they split in half. Well, I mean, not exactly. I mean, what it was the Mountain West Conference was teams that didn't really enjoy what they were getting from the WAC, and so they went on their own, I guess, and started their own conference. And I think they included another team that wasn't in that. I think UNLV or somebody was actually included to keep it at 9 or something like that. So, and then they had the WAC, I think, was what was left with, and I think they had to add a team or two to get to 9. So the result of that, though, was that it didn't really work as far as keeping those rivalries. And then I don't know if there were problems with the 16 and getting a championship game together. I really don't remember, but it seemed to work okay other than that. But I don't know how successful it was. Maybe you can tell me.
Well, I'll tell you this, because you mentioned rivalries. So unfortunately, rivalries don't have anything to do with any of these decisions. However, we can rest assured as college football fans that 90% of the rivalries are going to stay intact, because 90+% of the rivalries are between status programs in the same conference, and they're going to remain in that same conference. So most of the rivalries, the great majority of rivalries, are going to be protected just by the sheer fact that they're both equal level brands that are going to stay in the same conference. But look at Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, look at Texas, Texas A&M, look at a lot of other great rivalries like Nebraska and Oklahoma that have been torn apart by expansion and realignment, and there was really no consideration given to them.
Well, no, my question again is, maybe I'm not expressing it very clearly. It's, I understand why they're doing it. I'm not so stupid I can't figure it out, but I think there's a better market value, I guess, for if you play in the SEC, you're probably going to get a better share of the revenue or something just by being there. I think it makes it. I don't know why exactly. I mean, it's a better product, I guess. Ultimately, I think you're.
Yeah.
So
They have a better product that's able to negotiate a better media deal.
But I guess my question again, Mark, is so do you stop it at once? It was 16? Is that the end of it now? Or I mean, I've heard mention that I think even that's part of the conversation, isn't it? That Clemson and what was it? The other team that we were talking about, Florida State maybe might actually leave. I mean, which I could see that happening actually. Florida State, I don't know, maybe Miami, I don't know, might leave to the SEC. So that's beyond 16 if that's what happens. I mean, we draw the line at 24 then? Is that what's going to happen?
Yeah, you're totally correct that the leagues become too large to play a reasonable schedule and determine a champion. If you've got 24 teams and you've got a 9-game conference schedule, then you have all sorts of scenarios that can result in not figuring out who should be the conference champion because not enough teams play each other. So you're completely right there. You get to a point where you have to build some kind of like NFL kind of structure of divisions, and within the conference, multiple divisions, and then you almost have a playoff within your conference to determine a champion. You have to. You're right.
One other question, Mark, if you don't mind. And then that was kind of partly why I sent you the information I did, because I kind of wanted it to reflect the former state, I guess, of where the conferences used to be. I know that's old school, I guess, thinking, but if you look at the data that I sent you, it's in the email I think I sent you, but you can kind of see that even with the old, because I used the data as if they were still in that grouping, even though they're not anymore. But the Big Ten was still pretty far up on the ladder there. So I don't know. I guess the question I still have really, I mean, I understand maybe bringing in Nebraska. Who was the other team the Big Ten brought in? Was it Rutgers maybe? Anyway.
In Maryland.
Oh, in Maryland. Yeah. Well, Maryland seems to be a pretty good fit. I think that was a pretty smart move. But, I know Nebraska's done pretty well at times. I mean, I don't know if they're ill suited to the Big Ten. I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on that. I think, I think they've done, pretty well overall. I mean, I know lately that's not necessarily true, but, I think they've had a hard time. Do you think that they'll do better now with the coach they brought in? I can't remember his name. He was from Baylor, I think. Yeah,
they made a great hire, in my estimation. Matt Rule.
Is that
was a great hire? Yes. But just I will make one statement on Nebraska's move from the Big 12 to the Big 10, and then we'll move on. But the only thing I have for you there is the answer to the question of whether it was a good move for Nebraska to move to the Big 10 depends on what you consider success. If you consider money success, then it was a good move to go to the Big 10. If you consider on-field football success to be the measurement, then it was a bad move for Nebraska to leave the Big 12.
One idea, and you can tell me what you think of it. I noticed Vance Joseph just got hired as Broncos defensive coordinator. I kind of wondered with Mickey Joseph being at Nebraska if he might not have been a better hire. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, Mickey Joseph would not be a better hire, not because of his football ability, but because he assaulted his, I believe, significant other, and he is buried in legal situation right now. I don't even know where that stands. I know he was arrested, and he's in that process right now.
Well, I guess the question I have, though, is that Matt Rule, he was, where was he before? I know he was at Temple and then at Baylor. Where was he after that? I didn't really follow him that closely.
He was the head coach at the Carolina Panthers.
Oh, he was a professional coach. Okay, I didn't know that. All right. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate you being here.
Have a good day.
All right. We've had a good time here at the Voice of College Football for the last 2 hours. We just hit the 2-hour mark. And again, if you want my full thoughts on all of this concerning, hey, we got a list here. We covered the Pac-12 and the ACC. Maybe this is the one thing that we did not cover would be the possible merge between the Pac-12 and the ACC and what that could look like. Maybe I'll post a video on that. And again, consider we're going live again tonight at 8:30 Eastern. So we've got Michigan live at 5, Florida State at 6, Miami at 7. And consider the last two teams involved there that we mentioned. So it's not just going to be Florida State football talk. It's going to be about all this mess. And also Miami, by connection, is also part of this and potentially part of it. So our Miami show is at 7 o'clock Eastern with Cam Underwood from State of the U. And then at 8:30, we'll be back here to take your comments and calls and questions here at the Voice of College Football. But if you missed most of our live stream here, I jumped on at 10 a.m. Eastern just because I thought this is the talk of college football. We want to sort out what the truth is and what's unknown. So right now we've got a ton of misinformation out there, disinformation, and illogical garbage. So that's flying all over the internet. People making speculations, and that's fine to make speculations, but people talking like they know and writing like they know. So we cited some of those sources, and there's people out there writing blogs, and they don't know what they're talking about. And again, and they have sources that aren't cited. They just have sources. Well, if you've got a next door neighbor, you've got a source. So legitimate sources are different. So we didn't dive into the Pac-12 and the ACC merger that is being discussed. But I will let you know that, again, just days after USC and UCLA joined the Big Ten, I posted a video that said, don't be surprised if this is the next move of the Big Ten. Oregon, Washington, Cal, and Stanford. And a lot of people criticized me and made fun of my proposal for the Big Ten because they said Stanford and Cal football sucks. But I laid out all the reasons why that would be a great addition for the Big Ten. And here we are 8 months later, and this may be what is in play. All right. So if you take our live stream from the top, if you've missed much of what we've talked about today, go from the top, because I went on for 35 minutes about, first of all, again, the point from the top is Oklahoma and Texas, USC and UCLA left their conferences, made major moves that involve all sorts of legalities, money, budgets, academics, facilities, travel considerations, logistics, all of this. They did all of that, and nobody knew it. Not the best insider in college football. We were all blindsided. Nobody knew about it. So consider that when people are running around telling you that they know what is going to happen, they don't. Nobody knew the two biggest moves in this century in college football. Nobody knew about. And again, they're the biggest moves possibly in the history of college football, not just because of those four programs, but because of the domino effect and the ramifications from those moves. We could possibly see, I'm not predicting it, the end of the Pac-12 because of that move. If USC and UCLA were still in the Pac-12 would have a good deal right now. Not the best, maybe the worst of the Power Five, but still competitive, still capable of survival. And they may survive still with SMU and San Diego State, but they've got to get creative. They've got to partner with maybe a number of services. I would advise them, and I'm no expert, to spread the wealth, get a network deal, get a Amazon deal, at least those two, and go from there. I wouldn't lock in, like we've heard in recent days, that the Pac-12 may sign an exclusive partnership with Apple. There is a reason to do that, and there are benefits to just doing that, which would be, everybody knows, if you love the Pac-12, not just for football, but you love everything involving the Pac-12, you graduated from Washington State and you love the Pac-12, then everything that you want from the Pac-12 is on Apple. And that's the one subscription I got to make. I'm done. So there is benefit to that. But I think the cons far outweigh the pros, and it's better to be diversified in the media space. The Big Ten cut the mastermind of a media deal. It is straight from, and it shouldn't surprise anyone because Kevin Warren has an NFL background, and obviously now he's back in the NFL, that the Big Ten basically built a media platform that is like the NFL. They have covered all the time zones on multiple networks, and they're all major networks. And then what happens there is that if you are on Fox every day at noon, then part of the negotiating deal is that you tell Fox you have to promote the rest of our games. You see this now, and you didn't used to see it. 40 years ago, you didn't see ABC telling you what was going to be on CBS. You never saw that. But now you see it all the time. Why? Do you think NBC wants to tell you what games coming up this week, like in the NFL, when you watch the Sunday night NFL game, they will tell you Amazon's got the Thursday night game, the Monday night games on ESPN, then the split double headers on CBS on Sunday. And NBC is telling you, go watch the NFL on other channels. Don't watch our programming, watch the NFL. Seems crazy. That didn't happen years ago. Why does it happen? Because the NFL told NBC, we're only cutting a deal with you if you tell people where they can find our games. And you see the same thing in college football now. Regardless of where you're watching the game, they will tell you. So now the Big Ten has locked up all these time slots, all the way from noon, all the way until 1 o'clock in the morning. And considering USC and UCLA coming from the Pac-12 and playing those kind of games, shoot. When it's a non-conference game and it's going to be on the Big Ten network, let's say, and it's USC and Fresno State, shoot, that game's going to be on at 2 o'clock in the morning. So the Big Ten's going to be on for 14 hours. And during all those windows, starting, let's say, it's not going to be every week, but primarily Fox at noon. Maybe it will be every week. Fox at noon, they're going to be telling you, go to CBS at 3:30 for the Wisconsin-Minnesota game. Then go to, who is it? Is it NBC for the primetime game? At 7:30, Ohio State and USC. And then late night, we've got a Big Ten Network game, which is going to be Nebraska and UCLA. And the Big Ten, and of course, Fox. Okay, let's take it through the day. Let's make the 3:30 window an example. It's 3:30 on CBS. Well, they're showing the Minnesota-Wisconsin game on CBS at 3:30. Well, there were 3 Big Ten games at noon. Their pregame show is going to show you the highlights of those games. It's all going to be connected, and they're going to show you that at 7 o'clock, you go to, who would it be? Go to NBC for the Big Ten game. Then the Big Ten Network's going to have the 2 10 o'clock games. So it all works together, and they promote each other, and they're going to have to show the highlights. They're going to want to show their property, because even if you're CBS and you're showing Minnesota, Wisconsin, and you know Ohio State, USC is on NBC at 7 o'clock, you still want to highlight those teams, because you know what? Next week, you might have the USC Nebraska game. So what the Big Ten did, they just put it all together. They built an NFL model schedule. All right, folks, we appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. Thank you for being here. I believe we have done enough damage. Unless somebody wants to call me, I am certainly willing to hang out some more with about 200 folks on the line. But we have the Amazon link. So please use that. It's in the description section of all the videos. So please, you can support us by shopping Amazon. You already do, so you might as well use our link and give us 3% and Amazon 97% instead of giving them the full 100%. So think about that. They're worth $1.7 trillion. That was the figure I saw. Amazon's worth $1.7 trillion. The Voice of College Football, we're only worth $1.3 trillion. We would like to catch Amazon. So when you're giving them 100% of your money, at least toss us 3% by using our link. that's in the description section of all the videos. And because of the kind work of guys like Joey and John and Exploring with Ben, the link, I'm sure, has been sent many times in the chat as well. So the Amazon link is crucial to us, and it benefits you as well. All right. Doesn't cost you a penny. We got merchandise. Hey, go to thevoiceofcollegefootball.com. Check out our merchandise. And I have left the link in a number of places on the community page on our channel and elsewhere. We will continue to leave it. And I've seen it in the chat today. So check out our merch. We got a new merchandise line, and we're excited about that. And we've got a lot of options. Joey continues to add to the line of options. And if you've got a suggestion, let's say you say, hey, can we get that in lime green? It's possible. So, but there are a ton of options already there. Absolutely. Good stuff there. Big Ten and SEC shows. So think about doing this for 2 hours on Monday night and 2 hours at noon on Tuesday. Nothing but Big Ten talk starting next Monday at 6 Eastern with you and with a lot of great guests. So we will bring in our very best from the Big Ten. And always let me know who you would like to see on our show, and I will do my best to bring them in. And then Tuesdays at noon is going to be SEC block here at the Voice of College Football. And of course, coming up Thursday, listen up, everyone, Thursday at 4:30 Eastern. It's myself, Steve Dace of Michigan Podcast. We go toe-to-toe on one big major college football topic, and we call it The One. And again, be here. We fire up the live stream at 4:30 Eastern on Thursday right here at the Voice of College Football. Michigan live at 5, Florida State at 6, Miami at 7. We'll be back here tonight at 8:30. And you know what? If anything happens, there's anything that breaks this afternoon, we'll be back here live right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate all your contributions. Please hit the like button on your way out, and we will see you at 5 Eastern, if not sooner.